Hi everyone, welcome to the second tutorial for ART363B. This one is going to be on making and applying brushes. Previously in our tutorial, we learned how to apply strokes. Now we're going to learn how to make some brushes. Go ahead and download this file. This will be the only file you will need to download. So you can click and go ahead and press the download button up here. And I've already downloaded mine, so I'm not going to download it again. But once you've downloaded the file, you can go ahead and open it up on Adobe Illustrator. It's not working. Try to open it. Let's go to, there we go. Perfect. All right. So for this assignment, I'm going to be teaching y'all how to make different brushes. Excuse me. So for this assignment, I'm going to be showing you how to make different brushes. Now, what are brushes? First and foremost, brushes can be are basically like it's a tool that you can use and it will apply a certain style to your stroke. Now, this is not to be confused with the pen tool. The pen tool is going to be used for making shapes. And for those of y'all who have played around with these tools over here, the pencil tool also similarly works as a pen tool. So, for example, if I use the pen tool to draw as best of a circle as I can, it will create a shape of a circle. Whereas if I use the pencil tool, I can kind of do the same thing, but with a stylus or my mouse or something like that, right? Now, the brush tool is a little different. The brush tool allows us to freehand stuff, but it won't close up the shape. It only creates strokes. So if we wanted to close up the shape, we would have to manually do it, which, we'll go over that a little bit more later, but you can use Command J to join open paths together. But the brush tool is also very special because what we can do is we can grab a stroke. We can go to Windows and we can go to brushes, which I have open over here already. And we can apply these different styles onto our stroke. Now, as a quick reminder, you cannot change the line weight of your stroke, and in some cases, you can't even change the color of your brush stroke. It just depends. It depends on the type of brush that you use. The only way that you can do that 100% is if for some of these there are exceptions, but going back to basic is always going to be like your best bet of having full control over a simple stroke. But today we're going to play with brushes and kind of how they work. But brushes can be used on paths and like shapes as well that you want to change the style of the outline with. Now, to kind of start off, you're going to open up your brush window, so Windows and then brushes again. You can also access it on the top corner over here. If you've forgotten how to do that, you have to go to Windows, Workspace, and Essentials Classic. That will allow you to have these options on top. And to kind of start off, we're going to go to the pancake stash and we're going to make a new brush. You could also do this by clicking this little box with the plus button down there too. So let's go to new brush. Let's start off with a calligraphic brush. Now, a calligraphic brush allows us to create a circular brush. So this is going to be the style of the brush, what it looks like. We can adjust the angle and roundness, which we can also rotate over here on the little display icon. You can flatten it if you want it a little bit flatter. You can set the size. The size is going to be the default size of the brush, so that's just kind of good to know. If you want to add 13 points always when you put it down first, that's what it'll do. And what you can do is once you press OK, you can literally draw using the brush. I think I accidentally canceled, but there we go. So this would be my name with this brush tool, right? Now, at any time, if you need to pause, feel free to pause to slow down a little bit. But before we jump to the next one here, I also wanted to show you a little bit more with this calligraphic brush. Now, first and foremost, if you double click a brush you made, kind of like over here, you can go back and re-edit the properties of the brush. So if I want to add like a different angle and I press OK, it'll allow me to either leave these strokes originally the way they were, which is what it looks like now, or if I press apply, it'll apply the new settings onto all the strokes I have made using that same brush. Another thing I also want to show y'all is if you select everything here, select everything, let's double click this again. Now, we also have different options on each of these. Now, what's kind of good to know is if you're not using a stylus, most of these probably aren't going to work for you anyways. So, for example, if I'm using stylus wheel, a stylus wheel is basically like on some people's styluses, there's a little wheel on there. Mine does not have it. I believe like it's more in like airbrushing. Was it from what I remember? A lot of like airbrush simulating like styluses may have that a little bit more, but most of the time I just have two buttons on there, right? Rotation is another one. Rotation will allow you to rotate your brush, your stylus live, and it'll also rotate your brush live. So unfortunately, like I'm using a mouse right now, so I can't really show you this. But these are just some of the options that you could have when using a stylus. So just to kind of go over the other ones too, pressure is going to depend on the pen pressure of like your brush. So if you wanted like size variation, so you can go over here and let's maybe set this on pressure. You can have more thickness as you press harder and a thinner line as you press lighter with this much variation, right? Random is just going to randomize it. Like every time you lift your brush, it would just change like the roundness of like the brush or whatever you want to set it on. Whereas like the only other ones I really haven't talked about would be like tilt and bearing. I don't know what bearing does, but tilt is going to depend on the tilt of your brush. Now, tilt and rotation are a little bit different. Rotation literally allows you to spin your brush to change. Let's just say you want to change like the angle of your brush, right? You can literally rotate your brush as if it was a real brush, and it will rotate like the angle of like this brush. So if you wanted it to be like a little bit, if you wanted this to tilt a little bit more counterclockwise, you could actually do that live and it'll do that for you. Tilt is going to be based off the tip of your brush, kind of like if you were shading something, if you're using the tip or the side, it would change like whatever properties you want based off of that. Now, one last thing is before we jump into like anything else, rotation is the only option where it is going to require you to buy a special stylus for. Unfortunately, they haven't been selling this one for a while. I would maybe look up some other pens that have this ability, but for Wacom, it will be the Wacom Art Pen. So you see, it allows 360 rotation sensitivity. New brushes might have it, but But just kind of keep in mind that that might be the only feature that may require you to update your stylus for. Um, Otherwise, though, you can set these on anything you want. So let's just say I want everything kind of at random and I want variation. So what that will do is, and then we'll just leave these strokes because he keeps these the same. I can go to my brush tool and I can select that. And every time I make let's see, let's try that again. Yeah, every time I draw, you see, it's like a slightly different line, right? So you could get a lot of like interesting line variations that way. But that's generally like how the calligraphic brush works. It really affects like the stroke length, the thickness, and like the angle of the brush. So if you want something that's a little bit more graphic, it's a great brush to use. Once you've done that, select this, go ahead and click on this again, and you can apply that brush onto here. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and make a Bristol brush. Now, if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out and we can set an appointment. Otherwise, feel free to pause this video to kind of work on this section. All right, the next part, we're going to go ahead and create a Bristol brush. Now, a Bristol brush is going to basically emulate a real brush as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and click on this time, and we're going to click on Bristol brush. And you'll get a lot of options here. So on the top, we can name our brush whatever we want. Now, it is pretty helpful to do this just because, like, if you wanted to go back and see which brush you made, it's a little bit easier to, be organized in that way. But again, you can set your size over here, the length of your brush. You can choose the different kinds of brushes too, which is kind of neat. And based off of these like options, you'll get specific line weight, you'll get different opacities, different textures. And once you're done with that, you'll press OK. And we're just going to go ahead and grab our brush tool with selective brush. And you're just going to go ahead and try your best to trace this. Kind of like that. For this part, don't worry about it. You can actually just leave this the way it is, but go ahead and use your brush tool to do that. And you can even create some really, really interesting lines using your pen tool as well. So you can see like it creates some really beautiful strokes. But again, if you need a moment to pause the video or what is it? Pause the video or just catch up on these things, feel free to do so. Otherwise, and just hang on tight. Well, that's very strange. I don't know why it's doing that. Just remake it. And most of the time, like when you have a stroke, I don't know why it's doing that, but if you have like a stroke, you could totally just select these and apply these, and that works too. So when you're finished with this part, that's kind of what it should look like. Don't worry about this part though. If it's not working for you, just do that part. You can always try remaking the path and applying it again. I don't know why it's not doing that for this one. Just delete these just to not confuse people. Now, the next brush I want to show you how to make is going to be called a scatter brush. Now, a scatter brush requires us to use artwork from something that exists. So we're going to use this fireball. Now, before you all get started, make sure to copy and paste another fireball. To copy, you can do a Control or Command plus C. Whereas, what is it? To paste, it's going to be Control or Command plus V. And it's just a control and command are going to depend on if you're on a PC or like a Mac. If you're a desktop Windows user, it's control. If it's like Mac, it's command. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and we're actually going to put this by the dragon. We're going to use this for a dragon. But for here, we're going to select on the fireball. We're going to click on New Brush. Make sure to select the fireball. And you should see the option to create a scatter brush is now not grayed out anymore. So let's go ahead and select that and press OK. And we can make this, let's do Jesse Scatter for the name. Now, the cool thing about this is you can actually set different settings on your scatter. So if I want like something fixed, we can have like fixed sizes, fixed spacing, fixed scatter, fixed rotation. Actually, I don't want it to rotate really, so I'll change that a little bit later. But I'm just going to go ahead and press OK for now. We're going to select this path. I'm just going to apply it. And you can see it adds these balls in here. And I can click on this again to, oh, get this fixed, so it's not really going to randomize anything. But that's not really what I'm looking for, right? Now, we want to teach, this is Ken over here. We're going to teach Ken how to use a new fireball technique that's going to allow a bunch of different scatters. Okay, so even though this would kind of be a cool attack also, it's not what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and double click this again. And I'm going to set this at 0 because I don't want my like fireballs to rotate. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to go ahead and press random. Now, again, you can also utilize your stylus for any of these other options down here if you ever wanted to just paint them in, with a brush. But if you're doing it along a path and you need to randomize, we'll just set these at random. And basically what's kind of good to know is this is going to be like your minimum size, so the smallest that you want your fireballs to be, and these are going to be the maximum size, which is like the most that you want them, right? So let's go ahead and just kind of create kind of a contrast here. So my smallest sizes versus my largest. We're going to press OK. Let's apply. And look, now we got a whole bunch of fireballs being shot out. And I can click on these and just click on the fireball to randomize how I want it to look too. So if you're ever not sure like how you want it to look, like you could do that. There's a very specific way you want it to look though. You might as well just organize these on your own, right? But otherwise, like if you're just like working on these things if you just like randomize, if you don't really care how it looks, you just need it random, you can use this to kind of randomize the different fireballs. But go ahead and take a moment to work on this a little bit. You can even grab a brush and you see you can create fireballs this way, right? So once you've kind of made these fireballs for Ken, that's basically it for this section. Again, pause the video or if you need to slow down, or feel free to rewatch it if you need to as well. Otherwise, in a little bit, we will jump into the art brush. All right. So for this next part, we're going to go ahead and make an art brush. So what is an art brush? An art brush will allow us to use an existing piece of artwork as a brush. So if you haven't saved one of these like fireballs from earlier, you can always go up here and click and drag them down and you'll get another one. And what we're going to do is I'm going to click on this. Let's go ahead and press the new brush button and let's make an art brush. Now, when you get an art brush, you will be granted with a bunch of these options, which can be confusing. Now, the first one I want to go over is scale proportionately. Now, just to kind of show you all, an art brush, if I have it on scale proportionately and I draw with it, it'll create a brush that's using the artwork in the size and direction that my brush is going. Based off the stroke length, the bigger the stroke, the bigger the brush, the smaller it will be. And I can have it go in different directions, making it very, very easy for me to create very quick designs. So if I wanted, like, for example, oops, I think I accidentally deleted my art brush. Let's make one again really quick. If I wanted to create like a bunch of like fire, right, I could like basically do that pretty fast this way. So it can be a very useful tool. Now, I also want to show you some other capabilities of this brush. So let's go ahead and double click this. Now, first and foremost, you can again use these to adjust the width of like your brush itself. So it would change like, the size of like all of these other things based off of like pen pressure, stylus wheel, tilt, bearing, and rotation, right? But we're just gonna have ours on fixed. And we're gonna go over here. And the next one I'll show you all is fit stroke length. Fit stroke length will basically make it so that if I draw with it, like mess that up there. If I draw with it, it will basically stretch out the brush based off of the length of my stroke, right? So this can be really, really cool because I can create my flamethrower this way, right? If I wanted like a little bit more of like a swirl, I could do that. Or if I want to write the words fire, I could write the word fire with it. So it can be a very, very powerful tool, y'all. Another thing that you could do is stretch in between the guidelines, which means that if I can adjust my guidelines here or over here, these like values as well. But anything from here to here will stretch, whereas anything from here to here won't. So if I like draw it again, you could see that the front part is not stretched, but the back part is, creating a little bit more of a fireball sort of like look or a meteor sort of look, right? But you can get a lot of really cool effects this way. Now, other things to think about are going to be your direction. I'm sorry, I don't know what colorization does, so you're going to have to look that up. And then you can also have these different options here for how you want to flip how things look. So, for example, let's just say I have my direction from up to down. This means that the beginning of my stroke will show this side and the end of my stroke will show that side. So just to kind of show you all really quick, actually, before we do that, let's do up and down. Let's go to fit stroke length. Let's go to leave strokes. And if I draw this way now, it creates more of a wall of fire, right? So I can create like different artwork this way just by changing the direction of stuff. So this will be from background to foreground, or back to front instead of front to back. So I would have to draw backwards instead for this one, right? But if you ever needed to change or stretch out certain things, like based off of your stroke length, you can change the directions here to get different effects doing that. You can also flip. So if you ever need to flip how like things like are going to look, you can do that here. But overlap is probably something a little bit more particular. For overlap, it would change the way things overlap. So for example, let me go ahead and just kind of delete these over here. We don't really need these right now. Oops. So if I draw a corner kind of like this, it'll overlap this way. But if I double click and change the overlap to this, it'll try its best. It'll try its best not to overlap these parts over here. So you see, it gets you like a slightly different effect, right? But otherwise, like once you've kind of created some like flamethrowers over here, that's really all there is to it. So just a quick review. I would just double click this over here. You could either have it from stretch to fit stroke length or stretch in between the guides. And I would just make sure if you're doing it in between the guides, it's just the tail part that's being stretched over here. And you want it from left to right. So that way, the start of your brush is going to be where the tail is, and the end of your brush is going to be where the head is. That's basically it, y'all. Go ahead and take a moment to work on this part and play around with it. You can pause the video, and when you're ready, we'll move on to the final part. So for the final part, we're going to be making a pattern brush. Now, what is a pattern brush? A pattern brush basically allows you to take an art piece and create a pattern out of it, kind of like that. And we can use this pattern on our brush itself, or we can use it and apply it on a stroke. So here's what I'm going to do. First and foremost, your pattern is going to be in the direction of your rotation. So for the first one over here, we're going to have to rotate it like this. So I'm going to select this, hold shift to rotate and snap by 45-degree angles, and we'll rotate it that way. You can also do the same for this one. And once you have these two parts rotated, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and create a pattern brush. So start off by selecting the art that you want to use as a pattern. We're going to click on the Make Brush tool button and let's go to Pattern Brush. Let's press OK. And to kind of start off, again, you can name your pattern brush here. And then over here, you have a couple options that you can play around with. So again, if you want your pattern to have like thin to thick or anything like that, like you can use the stylus over here to play around with those things. So you can have it so that, it's a smaller pattern as you press lighter and it's a bigger pattern as you press harder, right? But if you're just gonna have it fixed, you can have it fixed kind of like that. Set this back to 100. Now, spacing is going to be the amount of space you want between patterns. So if I have it on 20%, it'll give it a 20% spacing, right? 0 will keep them very close to each other. And over here, you got a couple options too. So you can flip, so both horizontally and vertically. And this is basically how you want your pattern to look a little more specifically too. Like on corners, do you want it so that everything is sliced in the center? Do you want it auto between? Do you want like an overlap? For your normal, tiles like over here, do you want these or do you want this design? You're not really going to use the bugaboo, so we're just going to go to original. And if you want to create like more of these, you can always make tiles. We will not be going over that in the class, but I recommend if you're interested, maybe find a tutorial for it. At least not right now, we're not. Over here is basically if you have two corners like this, how do you want it to be handled? So maybe we want those like that, right? So you can have different styles for how you want these parts to be handled. And at the front and start, you can always add a tile if you want to. In this case, we can add it for fun, but I think they turn out kind of big, so I might like take them off later. And the last thing is I want to show y'all is these three over here. Now, stretch to fit is going to stretch your design to fit the path. Space to fit will adjust the spacing to fit the path. Whereas approximate path will add more designs inside of it without stretching the design or the spacing. So you can utilize these different things to help you out with how you want it to look. Approximate path will keep your art the least stretched out. But if you don't mind a little bit of stretching or a little bit more space, like you can always use like these two to like help you out with that. But we're going to go ahead and press OK. Let's go to approximate. Let's press OK. And then you're going to select the path, and then you're going to go ahead and add that. Ooh, yeah, that's like really big. That's why I don't like it. But you can make it smaller, and that's kind of how it'll look. We're going to get rid of the bugaboos. So let's double click this. None. None. Okay. Apply to strokes. And there we go. Now you have your pattern of leaves. Again, feel free to stop the video or rewind if you need to review anything. But once you have this kind of set over here, you're going to do the same for these ones here too. So let's make a pattern brush. Okay. I'm just going to leave the settings the way they are. It's going to take the settings from the previous one. Let's make it smaller. It might stretch in some of these parts. That's why you have those options there. For this one, let's use this like arrow thing. You see stuff like this, like if you don't want that, you have different options that you can kind of like play around with. It's just a little weird sometimes. So maybe you want none so that way it doesn't even happen. Still kind of did something weird there, so maybe we can and then for the last one here, you can make your own design. So if I just make like see that's how you can make pattern brushes too. You can like use your brush to create different strokes for them. But if you have like something like this, for example, right? Actually, you know what? What if we take like this over here and make this smaller? Maybe something kind of like that. Select these, make a pattern brush. You see, you can make some really, really, really interesting patterns this way. So if you wanted to make like, different symbols or ornaments and things like that, it's a great way to like create patterns using those things. Once you're done with it, select like this bottom part here and just apply one of these brushes. And what you'll also notice is that pattern brushes also affect shapes as well. But hopefully that helped out, y'all. Once you have all of these things complete, you can go ahead and submit a JPEG in an AI. So save as, save on the computer, put your name in the front, Jesse underscore pack underscore, and then you can go to export, export as, and as a JPEG. And for the exercises, again, you can just keep them at 5. This is fine, 72 DPI. For projects, you are going to create 300 and you're going to go max. But for exercises, keep them small, press OK, and that'll be it. But if you have any questions about making brushes, feel free to reach out and we can set an appointment to talk about it. Otherwise, feel free to reach out during class as well. And I hope this was helpful for making brushes. Um, have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see y'all in the next tutorial.